What is going on, people, and welcome back to this channel. For those that are regular viewers of the channel, then you're going to recognise me, but for this episode, and hopefully episodes in the future, we've got something a little bit different, and I have a super interesting guy to introduce to you, and that is Steve from Aston 1936. Hello Steve, how are you?
Hey Josh, I'm doing good.
So me and Steve had a bit of a chat, and we were going to do basically a podcast together, and we just want to chat about some Aston Martin stuff, and yeah, we're both DIY enthusiasts, and Steve knows a little bit more than me about this sort of stuff. And originally I saw some interesting characters in America, and I thought, I want to get one of these interesting people on my channel. No, Red Pants was busy, so I managed to get Steve on.
Oh, just your second choice, but I'm the Canadian choice too. For those up in Canada, they're tuning in as well. So I'll do my best to represent North America that's out here. But yeah, Josh, I'm happy to be part of this, and I'm excited to be it. So what do you see as sort of our grand vision for us, during the podcast? Like, what's our goal here? What's our mission today?
Obviously, I'm not coming from a technical background like you are. So like you're doing Aston 1936, and that is quite like technical help guides for people. But one thing I did notice when I was doing my build on my Aston Martin is that there's not much out there, and there's a couple of people in the scene that can offer help, and there's not really that much out there. And I thought a regular podcast where people would tune in and ask some questions, and we could debunk some myths and maybe talk about some stuff that's out in the scene at the moment that there's two contrasting sides to the argument, and get to the bottom of.
Yeah, well, that sounds exciting to me, and that's I'm interested in tuning in. I don't think I want this to be just a DIY discussion channel, even though I'm here in the shop right now. I'm interested to talk about all the things that are related to Aston that are going on, particularly Gaiden era cars, that I have some experience with, and bring some opinion to the table. This is not going to be a DIY, a channel. People can tune into our other content for that. But I'm hoping to ask some questions and be part of some interesting conversations and share that with anybody else that's interested in listening in. So, which I wanted to start with is, so I'm interested to learn a little bit more about you, Josh, and can you give me maybe like a 2-second tour of what your personal life is? Who are you?
Yeah, to be honest, I keep a lot of my personal stuff off my YouTube channel, but I'm about to change my career, which means I can divulge a little bit more now. So I'm possibly going to say some stuff in here that I've never said on my YouTube channel or my social media. So basically, I've been in the army for 13 years. I'm an electrical engineer by trade. I work on generators, so that's my background in I guess why I'm willing to spanner on this Aston Martin. By no means an Aston Martin expert, but I know how to use some spanners. I'm recently going through a career transition where I'm going to be a product design and development engineer, and obviously that I've been rebuilding this Aston Martin Vantage. It was a crash damaged Aston Martin Vantage. A lot of people was very upset when I started this venture, but I believe I've got a good product to show at the end of it. And
well, we share a lot of things in common, that engineering background, and it was your YouTube series on recovering your Aston, of course, is where I discovered you, and then which led to me finding your DIY Facebook group that so many, literally thousands of other Aston owners have joined already. So that's what's brought us together. So I'm kind of looking forward to having a couple of bits of more discussion here with you.
Yeah, sure. And I think for my viewers as well, Steve, I think we should get a little bit about you as well.
Oh, well, I'm a nerd. I'm a computer person, partly. My career started as a mechanic. So, I worked for years as a mechanic, and then I went into mechanical engineering, wanting to design cars, and, finished my engineering degree and got out into the professional world, and ended up starting to combine IT in with my engineering profession. Live in California, where right now it's springtime and it's gorgeous here right now. And as I've watched more and more videos of other Aston owners dealing with subframe corrosion and other things, I am so blessed to have a California car that has literally no corrosion on. I feel a little guilty when I get underneath and I undo a bolt and it looks like it did when it came out of the factory. But that's, I'm an Aston enthusiast, although, I got my first Aston 8 years ago, and but I think one thing both you and I share is that we realize that Astons are just cars. they're a really fancy car with a really expensive paint job and really expensive parts, but still, they're, the principles of working on your Toyota Corolla and working on the Aston, a lot of stuff is the same. So I'm not afraid to, dive in and tinker with it. And one of the things that got me where I am is the, Aston1936.com. I realized that there was no content when I started working on my own car 8 years ago. I couldn't even figure out how to change the oil. And so I got myself a GoPro and stuck it on my head with a goofball, head cam. And I just decided I would videotape it, stick it out there on the YouTubes and see if anybody else cared. And
I think for me, a personal thank you. I think that's one of the things that really drew me towards you, certainly to ask you to do this podcast, is because, although you are like a self-proclaimed nerd, you are a very technical person, and I found with all your guys, certainly the ones that I've used for my car, they're technical. There's no if, buts and maybes. You'll let me know if it's a definite, and I like that. And it's not clickbaity, and I know that when I click that link, I'm going to get the answer that I want. And if it's not going to give me the answer that I want, you're going to let me know in the title. So it's always my go-to, certainly for guides. And although I haven't got a DB9, I've got a Vantage, and a lot of those things do cross over. Certainly the seat reset that I had trouble with the other week.
Well, I think that's actually an interesting thing to bring up, is that you and I, even though we share some similar interests, we're not the same. I think I'm probably, after we've had our first few chats here, I might represent the old guard. We're maybe a generation apart. I've got a DB9. I probably tend towards more of the, keep it stock. I like the look of the original cars. I don't think it's heresy to, make some subtle adjustments, but, I've seen some cars that are completely wrapped in chrome and, big giant wheels and things like that, I'm like one of the old conservatives going, oh my God, why would you ever do that? But, you sort of strike me as maybe you're representing the other side of the coin a little bit. There's a lot of guys that have Vantages, and I would say the DB9s maybe lean towards the conservative GT Cruiser guys, and the Vantages are the performance guys. But what's your take on that?
I'm definitely not scared of modifying a car, but I do have my limits, and the chrome and the stickers and all the badges, that is not for me. I'm more of a, when I like to modify my cars, generally as a rule, don't get me wrong, I've made some hideous mistakes in the past, but generally I like to modify them to like the standard that I would expect the OEM upgrades to be. So, I like to put on the next bit of trim level to maybe what I couldn't afford at the time and that sort of stuff. But I'm not scared of making stuff either. So, that for this Aston Martin in particular that I bought, this Vantage, I did have intention of fully track coring this, but I did develop a bond with it while building it, and especially I didn't realise I had such a rare vehicle at the time. I didn't know what an M420 were when I first got it, and when I bought it, I was thinking, right, this interior is going to come out, that's going to return me some money, and I'm going to put some bucket seats in there and a big old spoiler on the boot. And it took me a few weeks of trolling the internet to realise that I would be an absolute savage to remove that interior and put a boot spoiler on. Hence why it's looking pretty factory at the moment. And anything that I do to it, I'm always going to try and make it so it's removable.
Well, I think for the people that are tuning in with us here, that's maybe the two sides of the coin that we're both going to represent, though. You're probably going to lean a little bit towards modify. I'm going to lean a little bit towards conservative, but I think we both meet somewhere in the middle as well, and that's going to be kind of fun, a little yin and a little yang. But we do share a lot of common traits, right? We both, are willing to work on our cars, and I think that's what will draw, people to some of the content that we create. Like I said, they are just cars, and I really get a high from hooking somebody else on that idea that, they can do their own work. And so, you bringing back a car that was destined for the salvage bin, what caught me about that is part of me wanted to tune in to see the train wreck, right? I'm like, oh, there's no way he's going to be able to bring that back to life. But you did.
Well, I'm grateful that
right?
you didn't message me that like lots of other people did.
No, I thought it was insane, right? But that was interesting to me, is like, as a conservative guy, I was like, well, that car will never be the same as it was new. And could anyone really get that done on any real, any sort of actual budget constraint, right? So that's what I was interested watching. And you put in the labor yourself, you called in favors, you used other donor cars. Those are all great things to do. And at the end, you got yourself, a result. And I think, at the end, I was like, oh, he did it. I have not driven in your car yet, but, I think it's admirable.
You'll get a chance.
What you were doing. And I have also another thing, one of my pet peeves with Aston Martin and pricing and stuff is, and we'll cover that in another episode though, is Aston likes to consider, look at how many of our cars are still on the road. And I think it's absolutely a travesty that it's so easy for a DB9 or a Vantage to reach the write-off point, where the insurance company says that's it, let's dismantle it rather than fix it. I'm like, oh my God, that car could have been saved if someone just would have cared. And so if I want to empower people to care, and I want to get people interested in keeping the cars on the road, so this podcast might be a great way, for us to talk to different people and to talk about different topics and, share what we've learned, with others. And I'm kind of excited about it.
No, same. I can say that as well. I'm super excited about this little venture. If it continues, if the viewers want it, of course.
Yeah, well, let's hope somebody else watches, and this might be a good time for me to jump into the first real topic that one of the things we talked about earlier on was there's politics. Somehow in our little Aston Martin community, there's only 20,000 owners out there, and there is politics all over the place, including in the online, community, and even in the YouTube community. And, I thought that might be a place for us to start, our chat here. Now, I'll go first. I don't want to be part of anything that's political. I want this podcast to be neutral, and but for it to be a forum for maybe discussion of the things that have maybe brought out the politics in people. So, so where you and I are not biased, but maybe we ask the hard questions and we bring in people to interview, with us that we're going to talk about. Why is somebody on one side of the coin, and then we'll bring in the other person, and talk to them about the other side of the coin, and maybe sort of break down some of these political walls so we can all just enjoy our Astons together. And but yeah, it was kind of it was stunning that there were politics, right out of the gate. There's sort of different factions. I'm sure I've rubbed people the wrong way. I have no idea, but I always.
Yeah, I mean, I can vouch firsthand for these sort of politics, and it's been an adventure for me, and I'm of similar thought. I don't want to alienate anyone on this podcast, nor do I want to do it on my YouTube channel. I always try to be as tactful as I can if I've got a problem. But for sure, the best interest of the viewers is to get everyone involved. And of course, I feel like these politics do divide. These very well established people with starkly contrasting opinions. So there's always going to be two factions formed from something like that. But hopefully, this podcast and this channel can allow them two people to voice their opinion in an environment where it's not all one-sided. It's got two people's opinions, and then we can put the information forward so it's not getting cut by someone who wants to maybe remove the bits that they don't want people to see. That sort of stuff.
So Josh, do you remember, when I first Facebook direct messaged you, what your sort of initial reaction sort of centered around?
I mean, I don't remember the specifics of the conversation, but I for sure remember it was in a time where I was probably deep in some political rivalries on both sides of the coin, and I was a little bit unsure what angle you were coming from, and yeah, I were a little bit cautious to start with. Yeah,
well, and that's, I guess that's interesting, right? We're kind of all, until we know each other a little bit, we don't know, that we are just mates. And so I'm hoping this podcast, I've talked to Mike, from Bamford Rose a whole bunch of times. I consider Mike a friend. He's very opinionated, but it's also very interesting, to have a chat with him, and see what's going on. And he's certainly, a very popular person out there. And I hope that we can talk to, Mike, and we can talk to a whole bunch of other people on this podcast. we've been planning this, I remember, I've been sitting down writing my wish list of who we might be able to get on the show, and I was thinking about Mike and Rich from Red Pants and Stuart from Velocity AP, maybe Steve Waddingham, who's the liaison between the Aston Martin Owners Club and Aston Martin, maybe Tim Cottingham, who's an incredibly interesting person because he's the registrar for Aston Martin Heritage Trust. So if you want to figure out if your car is a one of one, he's the man to talk to, and so he'd be an interesting conversation, I think. It might be great if, on the wish list, it might be neat to talk with, James, JM, the YouTube personalities, talk to some of the other big YouTubers that might be out there as well. I'd love to have a conversation with the president of the Aston Martin Owners Club. There's political turmoil that's been going on over there. I'd like to get their perspective of what's been happening. And I'd love the ultimate score for me, if you can line it up somehow, Josh, is I'd like to see if we could find a way to get a conversation with the president of Aston Martin. And I'd really love to talk to Aston Martin about what is their position on keeping Gaydon era cars on the road. How does that relate to the pricing of parts? Do they really want to keep this high percentage of Astons out there? So is there something they can do to help us out? It'd be awesome to have a conversation with, the president of Aston Martin if we can somehow get this thing to go that far.
Well, I don't know the president of Aston Martin, but I do know someone who does know him, and they could probably pull that favour for me. So let's see how this thing goes. All
right, well, cool. Well, speaking of politics then, I'd like to jump into a political topic that you started, and it came from a tremendous idea. You created this alternative parts list, and it's something that us DIY guys, I think, really need, because we're all curious to know if are there alternate parts that we can get rather than going to the Aston Martin parts counter. And so why don't you tell the viewers or listeners or whatever we're going to call them, what your idea was at the beginning and sort of, where it started and where it's taken off to.
So, initially, obviously, I was trying to build my car on a budget, and although I was building it on a budget, I didn't want to build it with cheap parts, but I was made aware from someone that not all these parts are Aston Martin, and many of them do come from other brands, and you can often get the same part, in some cases with the same part number, for a different car, for a fraction of the cost. And initially someone sent me one for a DB9. It was like a short list, quite scruffily made. It was for the DB9, and I was using that to cross-reference parts from my Aston Martin Vantage. I wasn't aware they were a Vantage one at the time. So then I started, once I was confirming these parts, I started putting them into another Vantage list, and I was hosting it on Google Docs to start with. And then before I know it, I had multiple tabs of multiple vehicles. It was getting quite intense to manage. Obviously, with a Facebook group, Aston Martin DIY, that I started at the time, people were adding their content to it, and it was taking over a little bit. It became a consumer of my time. So
I know. I was adding parts to it, wherever I could. I think it took off sort of on a meteoric rise. As soon as people found it was there, right? You tapped, a centralized spot. So, and lots of people started to utilize the Google Sheet version. I remember that, and I hopped in there and I put a few things in there. But what ended up happening to the Google Sheet? Didn't some bad stuff happen to it?
Yeah, so because the nature of having a Google Sheet is you have to allow people to edit it. That's the only way that you can get people to contribute, and you can't just be like, well, I don't know of a way that I can say to people, you can edit this field and no other fields. I'm sure there's a way for some of the more tech savvy people out there, but I couldn't figure that out. And with the nature of my job, I sometimes do go away, for 2 or 3 weeks at a time, even longer in some cases, and I won't have access to any internet or electronics. And I went away one time and I came back and someone had fully wiped one of the pages, so the Vantage list had fully gone. Luckily I had backups, I managed to back it up, but it then prompted me, I needed to then go check all the other lists, because I thought, well, if someone's done this, I don't think it was malicious, I just think someone wasn't as tech savvy as they probably thought they were. And then later on, that happened again, not in its full form, but someone deleted a column, which was a costing column, not super important, but people had added that information, and then it was deleted. Again, I did have backups, so it wasn't a problem.
So basically you were running into the challenge of not everybody knows how to use a spreadsheet.
Yeah, I guess, and it's funny because I made it so you had to log in to do that, and I'm not sure if it was malicious or not, but I could see the individual doing it, and I'm not sure if they knew that I could see him. Of course, I didn't want to cause any political turmoil, so I kept that information to myself, and I fixed the problem. And I figured it was easy just to restore a sheet. It wasn't a major deal, but it was something that I had to manage, which I didn't like. So I eventually moved it onto a website, my website for the YouTube channel. I were going to start a website for the DIY group initially, but that's another financial outlay that I would then have to put into providing people with free information. So I ended up putting it on my own. For now, we might get an Aston Martin DIY website in the future, but I ended up putting it on that. And I thought, there's lots of people adding value to this community, but I thought what I can bring with me, being quite a youthful member, is I can make these things sort of more available and more user friendly, and I hope that's what I've done with it now. I've separated it into clickable pictures of the car, so you just click the picture of the car what you're looking for, and I've made the list searchable, so you can search for every field. So if you want a lambda sensor, you just search lambda sensor and all the lambda sensors will come up. Now it's not foolproof, people can still add junk. I still need to manage it slightly, but it definitely doesn't need as much managing as the original Google Sheets. But it's been a journey. Not everyone liked the transition, but you've got to allow them to.
Well, let's talk about that. That's the politics here. Is that so? People were complaining that it went from the I guess the Switzerland of Google over to the on your website, so that you could actually build the tool to sort of better maintain it. But was the reaction seemed to be in the group that there was some people got their nose out of joint because it's now it's like behind a paywall, or it was they just thought it wasn't as open as it was before. But that really wasn't your motivation, was it? Is it behind a paywall now, or is it still just freely available to everybody?
So it's still obviously open source, totally free information to get. But initially, so the way I ran the sheet is that you needed to log in with your Google account to edit the sheet. So I just transitioned that over to the website. So to view it on the website, you needed to log in with your Google account. Obviously, I got the information of your Google account, which some people weren't too happy about. But I don't think they realised that I also had the information when they were using Google Sheet. And then secondly, I think people assumed that it was going to get monetized, and that was never the case. I just wanted to make sure there were sufficient boundaries in place so an individual couldn't come along and just add a million things for them me to have to remove at a later date. There's 2,200 members in the Aston Martin DIY group, and I had about 5 people complain about it. It's just, I guess that's always the case with stuff like this, is the people that are disgruntled are always going to be the loudest people. The vast majority of that group are super grateful that I'm putting in this effort, and I do change things. If people have like problems, and rather than just telling me that it's crap and they don't like it, if they tell me that it's crap and they don't like it because of this and here's how you could fix it, I often do amend it, and I guess the Google Sheet was on about the 5th iteration, and my website's now on its 3rd iteration, and it's continuously developing, and as is the Aston Martin DIY Facebook group, it's continuously developing, and it's never going to be monetized in terms of no one's ever going to have to pay for information. That's the whole idea for this. There's thousands of places you could pay for information on your car. I want to bring it to people for free and put it in a nice, easy to read location.
Yeah, well, I think that's great. So there's no paywall, and does somebody have to be logged into your website to do a contribution now, or can just anybody come to the site and add a component to the list?
Yeah, so after the few complaints that I got from people having to log in to view it, I removed the login to view, but you have to log in to amend. So if you want to add something, you still need to log in. You can imagine the sort of troubles I get if anyone could log in. That would be susceptible to like bot spam, so someone could target the website
hackers.
and remove it.
Yeah.
And obviously, this sort of website or this sort of list, I'm not saying that any companies would, but it would be in some companies' best interest to not have this information out on the open source. So I don't think anyone is like that, but you could imagine how this could, affect certain companies providing parts.
Yep. Well, as an Aston Martin owner, I mean, I've already used the alternate parts list as I've been approaching, maintenance aspects to my car to see if somebody's reverse engineered the feed belt, or, where I could get that a little cheaper, or, whatever the part is. I know when I did a recent article on my O2 sensor replacement, first place I started was the alternate parts list. And then, I've taken it from there. So, no, I think it's a noble cause. I hope, you keep doing it. I hope other listeners, take advantage of it and contribute. And that's where I kind of wanted to go next, was to one of my personal pet peeves is people that put, that when somebody says, hey, is there an alternative spark plug, I can use for my DB9? And somebody just throws out there, yeah, use this Champion 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It'll work great. And they don't provide any basis for the recommendation. I'm maybe too thoughtful or something, but my pet peeve is that if you're going to contribute an alternate part to the community in general, is that please share your research. What's the foundation for the recommendation, so that we can tell if it's just urban lore. I read some guy on a forum said, it's just a Volvo thingamabob, but that's not specific enough. That's literally, nothing more than lore. But if it's, oh yeah, I did it myself. Here's a picture from my phone of the old part and the new part, and they're identical. That carries some gravity, right? That convince me.
Absolutely.
Convince me that you somehow found that this alternative part is the same. We all like to say, oh, the coil packs, those are just, Jaguar ones. No, they aren't. They're Ford parts. But, what's the basis to the claim? And if there was a way...
that...
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. There's a bit of a delay here for people watching. There is a bit of a delay. And just to interject on that point before you move on, that is one of the biggest problems with it. People do add stuff that they have just heard. An example, I've used the lambda sensors, what were on that list, but there were other columns added for lambda sensors or O2 sensors. Yeah, so someone recommended a Ford Focus lambda sensor, and that is such a wide range of lambda sensors that are available for a Ford Focus. That is the problem. But I do caveat the list all the time, and I don't think I need to tell people like you, because even if that list said that this part is guaranteed because the head technician of Aston Martin said it's guaranteed, you, as well as I, would then take that and go and research it. And that's, I guess, the main thing to note about that alternative parts list is this sort of stuff's not guaranteed information. Yeah. This is to steer the individual to the right direction, so they can then do the research to find out if it is the same. So, for example, when I used the lambda sensors off the list, I did some research into what the 4 pins did and the orientation of the 4 pins, what sort of temperatures it's susceptible to. And I know you've done a big video on lambda sensors and O2 sensors, and there are subtle variations throughout it, and it's just due diligence on my part. I didn't want to put the wrong part on my car, and I hope everyone takes that approach. If someone asks me and they want to take my opinion on it, and I tell them which one I put in, then that's up to them. And I guess that's what the Facebook group is for. The list on its own is just information that you need to research. The Facebook group is, I am going to buy this part. Has anyone done it or done the research on this part? In which case they'll probably get someone like you or I, or many of the other people in there that know way more about Aston Martins than I do, commenting and letting them know if it is the right part, or if it's not quite the right part but will work, or if it's just not suitable whatsoever.
Yep, I agree with you 100%. The list should be, use at your own risk. And but there's really good opportunity here too, and you touched on it earlier, is that and the lambda sensors is one of the topics. But even if we just talk about tires, right? The technology has evolved. My Gaydon era car is 17 years old now, and when they specified the car, the Bridgestone tires were the thing. Aston picked it, got a bespoke set of tires made for it. And if you were the conservative that I might be cast as, you would just always use the Bridgestones because they're still available. But you'd be an idiot. You can make in one single change, if you switch from the Bridgestones to Michelin Pilot Sport 4S's, you can improve the quality and handling of your car, reduce the road noise, the cost is the same. There are literally, there's 17-year newer technology that's out there, and we should be looking for those alternate parts, that we can make an evolutionary step forward, if Aston was to design the car again today, right, they would take advantage of these things, right? So let's bolt on, the Michelins. Let's look at an alternative spark plug. Let's look at the newer lambda sensors. Let's look at the better oil, or whatever the topic might be. I think there are evolutionary parts that we can look for, that we can make our cars better. And that's something I'm really keen to explore, and that's why I publish videos. When I discover something that I think is an evolution. The other side of that coin is something I'm quite passionate about too, is cheap ass parts. Where if one of those things right now I see in our group, being talked about in other groups and on other forums, is alternative coil packs. Coil packs are very expensive from Aston Martin, especially if you need 12 of them, like for this beast. And you can spend $1,200, $1,500 if you're having to change your coil packs. And right now there is chatter about people talking about these, for $140 or something like that, you can get a set of 12 coil packs off Alibaba from China. I can't make myself do that. I have to think what's going to be in there is going to be like, 2 squirrel sticks or something that, is doing something that's vastly more complex. And I'm worried that if I put a really cheap part into my car, I might get exactly what I paid for, and I might end up, with a lesser performing kind of vehicle. So, so what are your thoughts on like the, sort of these unproven low-cost Chinese, alternatives? Do you have any sort of thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, on the front of coil packs, I know you're a bit of a VW fan yourself as well, and a really common upgrade for coil packs in the VW scene is people love to put the red R8 coil packs. Now, I've seen some substantive dyno testing with those sort of coil packs, and they actually produce no gains over the factory Golf coil packs, what you might have replaced it with. So I think coil pack technology, and I mean, I'm yet to research these specific ones that you're talking about. There's not that much in it, but I think £120 is a little bit too cheap for something that should cost probably that per coil pack, or in the remit of that per coil pack, to get 12. That does seem a little bit too good to be true. But I'm not scared of trying cheap stuff when it doesn't really interfere with the engine that much. If it's something that I'm going to put on the engine, let's say if I was stripping the engine and I were doing a head gasket, I wouldn't put a cheap Chinese head gasket into my engine, because it's just so time consuming to get to, and if it fails it could cause bigger problems. But one thing I did replace, not the other week, is I replaced my AC compressor. Now, for those that don't know, the AC compressor that comes on I think it's the same AC compressor that comes on your DB9, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's just a Denso compressor. Aston Martin don't make it themselves, they basically subcontract it out to Denso. If you want it from Aston Martin, I got quoted £2,600 for fitting. It's probably about an hour's labour to fit, I would imagine, from a professional. So that really set me at about £2,400 for that part. Now, I did find I could get it direct from Denso for £600, but then I saw a Chinese part on Alibaba, funnily enough, for £96 plus shipping. And I just thought, this is too good to be true. And what I originally thought were, I can buy this compressor, because the damage with my compressor is it took a little bit of a hit in the crash. So my pulley was bent, causing belt squeak. Now, I changed my belt, I changed my pulley idler, and the belt squeak was still there, and it was definitely my AC pulley. I know that now because I've replaced it. But I intended on getting this Chinese one, either taking the pulley off and putting it onto my known good Denso compressor, just with a different pulley, or putting the Chinese one onto my car while I get the Denso one reconditioned by a professional, because realistically someone could probably put that pulley onto a lathe and straighten it out. So that was my intention. But since receiving it and comparing the two, they are so alike. And I guess if you're a company that's making compressors for cars, making one fit another car is not a big hardship. And I'm working on the basis that this could fail every year for the next 10 years and plus and beyond of my ownership, and I still have money left over. And that's paying someone to fit it. If you pay a normal garage an hour, that's no hardship. And I'll get my car washed while they fit it, because some garages do that. So So it's just it didn't make financial sense. So I've left that Chinese AC compressor on, not because I don't want to put the original one on, because everything about me wants to put that more valuable Denso one on, but I want to see how long this compressor lasts, mainly for research, so I can let other people know what it's like. I'm willing to tarnish my car with that stuff in the name of research.
Well, I think that's great, because honestly, part of me is like, oh, I can't wait to see how that turns out for you, because that's how we properly vet some of the solutions. Because I bet you that Chinese company didn't think, I'm going to make an alternate Aston Martin compressor. They're going to go, look, Denso makes this particular compressor that gets used in lots of applications, so I'm going to make a clone of this Denso compressor, and then it'll apply to all those applications. So, if you can discover one and, give us some sound basis that, oh, that's a safe bet, that's how we move it forward, right? And we can keep more cars with working air conditioning systems on the road, where other people might just say, well, screw it, I'm just going to have, no AC. I can't afford, $2,200 to fix it. So I'm excited by that.
This sort of stuff, as support is being pulled from these Gaydon era cars, this sort of stuff is more important than ever. And even if you were to get that Chinese AC compressor and send it to an AC compressor rebuild specialist in your country, you would probably have a quality internal of that AC compressor with that external casing still for a fraction of the cost of what Aston Martin are charging. And they're not necessarily charging that much because they're ripping us off. It's because they buy it in such low quantities now, because not many people are buying them. So they just have to put the price where it is, because they're buying like 10, 20 at a time rather than back in the glory days when they were buying hundreds.
Yep. Well, and I think there's an opportunity here for the alternate parts list to even get smarter from when people do have failures. So let's say somebody were to buy the 120 pound, Alibaba coil packs, and they put them in their car and they find that they've had 3 of them show up that don't even work, or they have misfires immediately. I'm not saying that's what it is, but let's say that was the example. Well, if somebody could then contribute to the parts list going, hey, I've tried these things are, were notoriously unreliable. My advice to you would be to avoid and look for some other alternative to it. That would be valuable to somehow capture in the alternative part. So if somebody has a negative experience, to provide the basis of their negative experience and maybe help us all steer clear of making that same mistake potentially. So, I don't know how you might capture that in the list, but, bad experiences can still be valuable to the group.
I think sometimes bad experiences are just as important as good experiences as well. And that is something that I did want to integrate into the group, but with the nature of this, I'm doing it all myself, and my web building knowledge is super limited. Because what I did want to have is at the end of each one, a rating. So like a 5-star rating, if you got that and it didn't work, you can rate it 1 star. If you got that and it worked, you can rate it 5 star. And hopefully people would play the game and only rate stuff that they've had experience with. And that's the tricky bit, is managing what people do, after, some people have opinions of stuff before they've even touched it. And I could guarantee you could put a post on about the Chinese AC compressor and you will have 10 people tell you straight away that it's a piece of crap and it'll never work. Well, there's one working on my car right now, and the person that recommended it to me has had it on his car for 2 years. But I bet you the people that say it's a piece of crap and it doesn't work don't have one, have never touched one.
Yeah, but yeah, my thoughts on it's definitely something I would like to introduce in the future. But it is quite a complex bit of code, and unfortunately, I'm not capable of that quite yet. And I would have to pay someone to do it.
Yeah, well, if we can, my thought was, I'm not a programmer either, but your idea of the ratings is pretty good, even if it could be that there's the DB9 page, and then there's the Lambda sensor section, and people could list, maybe there could be 3 or 4 Lambda sensors listed underneath, right? And then somebody has their rating. Oh, I tried this generic and it was crap. And then, I tried this MGK and it was great. And, if there was somehow that they could say in a description field just what their basis was, personal experience. Oh, I saw this article on Aston 1936, or, someplace else, that they could at least say where they're getting the ranking from. But that might at least, be a simple way, is there just might be multiple lines underneath the Lambda sensor section. And I like the idea of cost. and I like the idea of potentially having a link to where you could buy the thing, right? It's not meant to be a direct endorsement, but okay, it's a Mazda Lambda sensor, but where do I get it? But if you can link over to the exact one that you use personally, that's a big help to me. I can start there, and then I can continue my own research.
No, it is, and it's gone just like the Aston Martin DIY Facebook group is, and I'm sure Aston 1936. It's a continuous evolution, and hopefully it's just going to keep getting better and better and better. I don't want this to seem like a plug to that Facebook group, but I feel like, and although I do run it and I own it, it's definitely great because of the people in there, and it's not great because of me. I firmly believe, might be a little bit biased, but I firmly believe it's one of the best Aston Martin groups on Facebook. So you should definitely get yourself there. I said I wasn't going to plug it, but here I am plugging it.
Yeah, well, I
think it's even great for people that aren't intending on DIYing, but just some of the questions that do pop up, it's not really DIY, what I would consider DIY sort of stuff, but just like tire pressures on different types of tires, and just little questions like, when should I check the oil? How often should I check the oil? What is the procedure to check the oil? Because little things like this do vary on these sorts of cars. And if you own one and you don't know the correct procedure of checking the oil, then you should definitely look into that.
Yep. Well, and there are some very experienced experts on the DIY group right now. There are some current, Aston Martin mechanics that work at dealerships or that contribute knowledge to that group that I certainly get benefit from. I can ask a really technical question and I get a really technical answer. And then there is, just like you're saying, it's like there was a terrific post by one of the members that was just showing how to change the battery in his crystal key fob, and he took a few pictures with his smartphone while he did it for himself. And I just thought that was brilliant. That probably just helped tons of people on that group to do some simple task themselves that only costs about $2 for a new battery. So it's a great resource, and I appreciate you for
and I think even if people would never do anything themselves, even change the battery or check their oil, I think it's quite an eye opener to show what people like us think, and the fact that it's just a car, it's just nuts and bolts, and when you see someone with their engine out of the car inside their small garage, it's certainly an eye-opener to think, well, really changing my air filters is not that big of a job, and it's totally doable. You could definitely do it wrong if you had some shovel hands, but take your time and ask advice, and I think anything's possible on these cars for sure. I personally think that this car was easier to build than lots and lots of other cars, and don't get me wrong, it's the first car I've recovered from an accident, first crash damage car I've ever had, but the front end of this, which I'm very experienced in now, is so modular, like so modular. These things could be caved in a long way, and you can basically the chassis, the main monocoque starts at the windscreen. Anything further forward as that can be unbolted and replaced. Maybe some glue peeled off as well, but it's all modular, which you don't get many times. You don't get with many cars these days. You crash a Volkswagen Golf like that, and the chassis leg that's welded into the main frame will be bent, and then it's unrepairable, or someone needs to pull it out. They're definitely a lot easier than people first expect, that's for sure.
Well, let's do our best to bring other people along on the ride with us. So I've really enjoyed our little chat here today, Josh, and getting started on this process. And I hope that whoever's still listening at this point has as well. I'm going to put in a plug, for if you like this type of DIY information, you could go ahead and check out my website, aston1936.com. Also the companion YouTube channel I run for that, which there should be links to over on, the comment section here. It's not monetized. I don't work for anybody else. I'm just trying to share knowledge and give it away to you for free. So I don't really feel like it's much of a plug. It's like, hey man, here's a whole encyclopedia of information. Please check it out and use it for yourself. And I'd be happy to keep doing what I'm doing.
Yeah, and I mean, I'd like to plug your stuff as well, because you have helped me so much with. I just love the fact. I know I've already said it. It's just black and white, and it's easy to get the information from your blog. So that is my personal favorite go-to if I've got any problems. Obviously, second the Aston Martin DIY group.
Yeah.
But I mean, quite often someone asks a question and a link to your blog gets shared. So that just says everything. But also, I do have YouTube and I do have Instagram. And that is monetized. So go over there and give me all your money. No, I'm kidding. I get about one pence per advert that you see, but it is monetized. I do have a YouTube channel. I'm not as technical as Steve is, but I try and make entertaining content, while I'm building the Aston Martin Vantage. I'm not telling you how to do it. I'm just letting you watch me do it. And maybe there's going to be a bit more tutorial side of things on this Vantage as I get deeper into the Aston Martin DIY world, because it does seem to be becoming quite a dominant part of my life at the moment. Maybe I will start doing more stuff on the Vantage, and maybe me and Steve could have all aspects of the V8 era covered with his DB9 and my Vantage. But yeah, definitely get yourself over there and check that out.
Yeah, well, people enjoy watching your experience videos. I certainly do, and like to tune in. And there's something therapeutic about watching you sit there and reconstruct a front end and high speed, fast forward. I can just sit there and go, well, that's cool to do. And I'm not sitting there busting my knuckles doing it.
Yeah, it was pretty traumatizing. I guess the worst bit is once you've put it all back together, you then know you have to take it back apart again to get it painted. But yeah, that's in all the videos. I've rebuilt that car, I think 3 times in total now. But every time someone asks me what I'm going to do, and I'm like, I'm going to take it on a track, and they say, you're not scared about crashing it? I'm like, I'm probably the best individual ready to repair the front end of this car right now. Like, there's no one more suited than me on this car in particular.
Well, let's hope keep it between the walls, and and if you go out for a track day, be sure to shoot some footage of it. So
absolutely. And I think just before we do cut out and leave the viewers with this podcast, I think we should just see, do people want this to carry on? Do people like this? So I've never done a podcast sort of episode on my YouTube channel, and I don't know if this is what certainly my viewers are going to like, and I don't know about your viewers either, Steve, but do people want it? And if you do want it, then what should we call it? I mean, we've joked around about 2 twits talking about Astons, but let's get some name suggestions for this podcast if it is to continue. And meanwhile, we'll do some research and reach out to some contacts and see who we can get on the podcast for you, because ultimately, the more interesting people we can get, the more interesting this podcast is going to be.
All right. Well, I look forward to the next one, and I look forward to seeing what people are going to call it. So we'll talk to you next time, Josh. Thanks again.
Yeah, pleasure, Steve. Catch you later.